What of the hostages? What is the latest in terms of any potential deal or temporary deal to get more hostages back from Hamas?
So you've been covering this war for the past 75 days, I know, and as you reported, we had an outline in place according to which Hamas released some of the hostages in exchange for a humanitarian pause in the fighting, but then Hamas broke the deal. And they also started firing at our forces. And here we are discussing it again. We will continue to do whatever it takes and pursue every avenue to bring about the release of the hostages. This goal goes hand in hand with the other goal that we have defined, which is to eliminate the Hamas terrorist regime. And if it wasn't for the military pressure, the heavy military pressure that we have exerted on Hamas, we wouldn't have seen the release of many hostages up until now. That was what created the conditions for a deal. And we will not stop until each and every one of them comes back home. You know, we're talking about an 11-month-old baby, our elderly 80-year-old people are there. 25-year-old Noah Agramani, whose mother here in Israel is dying of cancer. Every moment counts.
No doubt every moment counts for sure. And the ability of the IDF to complete the missions that it's trying to complete is tested daily. There are repeated announcements of losses on the IDF side, almost daily, it seems. What is your assessment of where Israel's defense forces are in terms of the military mission first in Gaza?
Well, as you know, in the first days of the war, the first weeks rather, the heaviest fighting was taking place in the north. And right now, it's not that this area is still completely clear, of course. There are still many Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad strongholds that we have to secure. We have eliminated thousands of terrorists, more than 7,000. And we also destroyed much of the infrastructure. But right now, our forces are also operating in the south, in the area of Khan Yunis, where there's a lot of terror infrastructure. This is the major city, a very important one. This is from which some of the planning and the execution of the October 7th massacre has emerged. It's a city of Mohammed Def, of Yahya Sinwar, Hamas leaders. So we must operate there. We must eliminate the heavy terror infrastructure over there. There's still many tunnels, although we destroyed many. And if you've been following, just this week we discovered the biggest tunnel up in the north, right by about 400 meters from the Erez border crossing, the border crossing with between Israel and Gaza. And when you think about that, David, look at how many resources were put into this terror infrastructure. Hamas has been in power for 16 years, and all they brought to the Palestinian civilians of Gaza is misery, it's poverty, it's bloodshed.
When you see a tunnel of that magnitude and you combine that with the bias that you're talking about with the United Nations, just how disgusted are you with this misuse of aid money from all around the world that appears to have gone into terror infrastructure?
Very much, very much. And not only that, what also bothers us a lot is the turning of a blind eye, I would say, by many of these aid groups and international organizations to the fact that you just mentioned. We're releasing these videos. We're showing how humanitarian aid is coming in and how Hamas are diverting some of these trucks and stealing the resources that we are allowing in. And we want that humanitarian aid to reach the civilians of Gaza, the ones that we have told to evacuate to the safe zones. And it's awful. Hamas are terrorists. They're stealing from their own people. They're committing a double war crime of targeting our population from inside and underneath their own population. And once we eliminate them, once Hamas is gone, this is where when the war will end. It will be much better for Israelis and Palestinians alike.
And how disappointed and outraged are you at the performance and level of compromise that appears to be present in some of the leading aid agencies and affiliated organizations with the UN?
Very much. You see, the Red Cross are clearly not doing their jobs. They have not been able to secure access, or rather demand it, as we would have expected them to do, to the hostages. This is the number one humanitarian issue in Gaza right now. Our hostages, right, that are still being held there. This is the number one humanitarian issue in Gaza, and the Red Cross should demand the transfer of medicine to them, to check on them, to see their condition. And certainly they're not doing enough. Now, also, I'm not sure if you saw this video that the IDF released just yesterday of a hospital manager in Gaza, the Kamal Adwan Hospital, which is in the north of the Gaza Strip, and we have arrested dozens of terrorists from that hospital, in the area of that hospital. And he admitted during interrogation with the IDF that he was not only a hospital manager, but rather recruited by Hamas in the year 2010, and that he is aware of at least 16 hospital personnel, doctors, nurses, who are also part of Hamas. So we have provided abundant evidence of the use of medical facilities, clinics, and hospitals for Hamas's military purposes, to serve their war machine. And yet we're still waiting on, for some acknowledgement, some condemnation on behalf of the World Health Organization. What about these UN agencies, the Red Cross? Where are they? They know it.
And the same accusation can be applied when we are talking about sexual violence perpetrated against Israeli females on October the 7th.
100%. Just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, rather, I was very honored to participate at the event that took place at the United Nations, that really highlighted and brought awareness to this issue, the sexual violence inflicted upon Israeli women. It's horrendous. The silence of these organizations, the fact that it took them more than 2 months to say something. The fact that we had to throw this event in order for them to have this opportunity to even, say something about this issue, acknowledge what these women have been through. I said there at this event, David, that these women, these Israeli women, they were murdered first time when they were sexually violated by Hamas terrorists, the second time when they put a bullet in them, and we will not allow for a third time to take place. And I think that some of these organizations who have been silent or somehow discrediting the abundant evidence that we have around this issue are complicit in a third killing. I cannot comment further about operational military activity happening on the ground right now, or military strategy moving ahead. But what I can tell you is that the leaders of Hamas, Fatzir Sinwar, Muhammad Def, and everyone involved in the October 7th massacre, their supporters, they signed their death sentence. It's coming.
And beyond that, there is one country and an organization within that country that is routinely accused of pulling the strings of terror operations around the Middle East. What is Israel's message to Iran and the IRGC?
Israel's message to Iran is what we're doing in Gaza right now. We will not stop until Hamas is eliminated. Hamas is an Iranian proxy. Their budget, over 93% of it, comes from Iran. And we're not only sending a message to them, but to all of Iran's proxies around the region. It's important that we send this very unequivocal message against terrorism, that terrorism is simply a dead end and it's unacceptable. All the terrorists and the bad players around the world are taking notes right now. They're paying attention. So what we're doing here is very important. And we say that if we don't stop this here in our part of the world, well, it will get to other places as well, as you know. Why? Because it also happened in the past. When we had in Israel suicide bombings, we said one day it will reach the US, European soil. And unfortunately, it happened. So now what we're telling European, American audiences and elsewhere around the world, you should support Israel. You should understand what Israel is doing, because it's not only serving our interests, our security interests. It's for the civilized world. We just happen to be on the front lines.
How fearful are you that Hamas has intentions to cause carnage in capital cities like Madrid, Paris, and London?
Well, just a few days ago, there were reports that people involved with Hamas, potential terrorist suspects, were arrested in Germany, the Netherlands, and I'm forgetting one more country, Denmark. Again, it's not only here; it's not only in our part of the world. As I said, they're being arrested based on information and intelligence, and it's very good that these terrorists are being arrested because we don't want to see anything of this kind happening in other cities. This is why Israel is operating right now and sending a very strong message to all bad actors.
As it's sending that strong message, there has quite obviously been a rise in anti-Semitism around the world. How concerned are you about that rise, and what do you think the solution is?
These are two very important questions. Well, the first part is that I'm very concerned. I'm Jewish, I'm Israeli. Everyone is concerned, everyone of good conscience. In some cases, what's happening here, the war between Israel and Hamas, is just exposing the anti-Semites that were always there. It's not only because of the war right now. There were always anti-Semites, but under these conditions, suddenly we see their true colors in the light, so to say. As for your second part, the other part of the question, what should be done about it? Well, I think that there's a lot of ignorance out there. And I'm seeing what's happening on social media. There are so many historical inaccuracies, which is really mind-boggling. And specifically to speak about the United States and what we've seen from high education institutions in that hearing on Capitol Hill. This is outrageous, simply outrageous. They're trying to hide behind the facade of free speech, but it's either free speech for everyone or free speech for no one. Right now, we have a situation in which it's free speech for some. That doesn't work. And somehow, Jews are being left out of this discussion, out of this umbrella of protection against persecution. And anti-Semitism is just on full display in some parts of the world.
Once Hamas is defeated, you've talked about the need for a de-radicalization of Gaza. How does that happen, and whose job is it to do it?
So we say that once Hamas is eliminated, we want to make sure the two things will happen. First is that Gaza will be demilitarized because we cannot have a scenario in which we see a resurgence of terrorism. That's unacceptable. Gaza will never be a terror threat to Israel again. The prime minister has said so. The unity government has said so. The IDF has said so. And we as a nation have said so. And in order to have better hope for this region, the Gaza and the Palestinian society as a whole must be de-radicalized. We cannot have the situation in which they keep raising generation after generation to believe that Israel is some temporary entity that will one day cease to exist. And up until then, they are so-called refugees of wars that they themselves started, inheriting the fraudulent rights to be refugees under the auspices of the United Nations, through their self-ran UN dedicated agency, UNRWA, which is totally unprecedented. No other refugee community, refugee group around the world has ever had such an agency. UNRWA schools and their textbooks, we all know what's there. The Palestinians are raising, again, generation after generation for the hatred of Jews. And they don't just chant from the river to the sea, when they say it, they truly mean it, that the state of Israel is temporary, that one day it will just not exist. So we have to root out this ideology.
In terms of that UN inherent bias, where do you think that initially stems from? Obviously, more countries have joined the UN over time, but is there a sense that when Israel was created, the United Nations didn't think that it would survive and has been trying to do some sort of weird correction ever since.
There's a built-in anti-Israel bloc there. It's an institution where a country like Denmark has the same carries the same weight as a country like, I don't want to say, you fill in the blank, but Syria, for example, for instance. So Israelis at this point have really zero expectations from this body, and we are being targeted again and again and again. I don't have to tell you how many resolutions are against Israel, and if you compare, our situation to other conflicts around the Middle East or around the world, it's simply ridiculous. It's simply ridiculous at this point.